very, very informative. Excellent launch of our workshop. We do have a quarter of an hour for questions, so I'm sure there are many. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I have two questions / comments.
Yeah.
The first is being that I think we should also be focusing on the structures of each specific extraction market. Are you observing a cartelization or a monopolistic competition or competition? Because I think that this structure will be of great importance in understanding the last point, the speculative sort of dimension that you have discussed in length. The second issue is that while you have dealt with the dimension of timing, you haven't explicitly referred to the concept of discount factor. I'm just wondering whether you would like to say a few words with regard to how we form this discounting factor, given that in the current capitalist system, we are more or less myopic in discounting the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Lots to think about there. On the first one, around the structures of the extraction market, yes, indeed. And thinking of work by Brad Barham and with Stephen Bunker and others who focus very much on the organisation of the markets into which materials are sold and how those influence things like technological choice, cost competition, and the influence of those back on extractive communities. Absolutely right, it didn't feature in this account. It's not to say it's not important, it is indeed. The question of time, yes. I was myself quite myopic there in focusing on kind of biological time and geological time. There's a whole range of ways in which time is socially constructed, and the discount rate is one of those. For minerals, a lot of national taxation regimes, for example, recognise the depleting character of extractive assets and allow firms to make allowances for that in their taxation. So there's a recognition there in formal taxation law of this depleting character. Beyond that, I don't have anything specific to say about discount factors, discount rates. I would be interested to hear more, though, if you've got something you're particularly thinking about there, and how that shows up, how that's important for our accounts. I suppose that's what I'm trying to do. How does that influence our account of the political ecology? How should it feature within it?
Maybe if you start saying your names before you speak, and we start with each other.
Okay, my name is Daniel, and I'm not an entitled fellow, but I am a first-year PhD here. So just a question. So you say extraction is a mode of production based on the appropriation of an ecological surplus.
Yeah.
But I'm currently taking a course with Eric on Marxist political economy.
Yeah.
And so he argues against like the physiocrats who say that value is in land.
Yeah.
And that in order for there to be surplus, there has to be socially necessary labor time. So how do you reconcile those arguments?
Yeah.
Or are they opposed? Or
Yeah. Well, so yeah. Question of where does value come from if you don't subscribe to a natural theory of value? I'm not going to have an elaborate answer for you, except to say that is precisely one of the tensions between Marxian accounts of extractive industries and thermodynamically based ecological economics accounts. So in Stephen Bunker's work in 1989, that book, underdeveloping the Amazon. He pushes quite a long way towards a thermodynamic explanation of uneven development, which is about concentrated energy flows. And so it's a very physically based account. I suppose if I'm trying to think this through, that it's, so if you take an oil reserve, you know, the highly concentrated form of energy, it's a subsidy from geological, ecological processes. So that physically explains it. But the point would be to understand what. But it's not its physical subsidy character that matters when it enters the realm of social production, is it? It's the social value that concentrated energy resource enables. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of ecological surpluses out there that we don't appropriate because they don't have any social value to them. So, I suppose that's where I would try and want to distinguish it that way, which is that it's not the ecological subsidy itself, in and of itself, that matters. It's that the social value that can be gained from appropriating that matters. And that's why not all forms of ecological surplus are appropriated in that way.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, also Gavin is my supervisor, so.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Daniel.
This should be a bigger
It should indeed. It should indeed. No, but that's absolutely one of the tensions, and that's why I found, you know, reading a lot of the work that's going on at the moment through the EJOLT project around ecologically unequal exchange is fascinating, because a lot of the metrics that account uses are very physical metrics. They're tons of material or embodied energy, and an account of structural inequality based around trade relations, you can see in the numbers these inequalities, but they're physical measures. And I suppose that the bit that I would want to see is, well, what, and in fact that's the argument they make, isn't it? A lot of Joanne's work is to you take a money-based measure and you take a physical measure and you show how you get a divergence between the two. That what under free market neoliberal economics looks like a fair exchange is an unequal one in physical terms. That's the point of unequal exchange. But I suppose the tension in it is that the measurements of that are very physical measures. They're about embodied energy or the weight of materials. Or Alf Hornberg's one is about sort of the hectarage of land which the UK imports in the form of imported cotton in the Industrial Revolution, for example. That it was drawing 53 hectares of land, as it were, into the UK for every 1 hectare that was being used for industrial production in the UK. So these are physical measures that are somewhat at odds, I'll have to leave it there, that are somewhat at odds with a value theoretic account.
Just to begin with, perhaps some tension is between the fact that extraction is a bit on the interface of being primitive accumulation in production.
Yeah.
So labor enters as an element in the production proper, but not in the operation.
So it's an interface between primitive accumulation on one hand and, you know,
And being capitalist production.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So perhaps that's another reason why the theory of value is in labor.
Yeah.
Economics may pathway.
Because if one starts to look at exploration geology, for example, so the gift of nature argument is that there's no labour prior to its taking. Well, that's just not the case. That's what exploration geologists do, is that they go out and locate. So the tremendous amounts of labour taking place in order to produce these so-called gifts of nature. And that's where, from a very different academic perspective, the science and technology studies perspective is really good at talking about those knowledge production processes as labour processes through which raw materials become understood and made subject to investment or manipulation or whatever direction your account goes, whether it's about science or about capital. But that perspective is very good at capturing that the anthropological processes of work in laboratories, in the field, through which geologists and other resource workers create the gifts of nature. So I suppose what I'm thinking there is that one response to your question, Daniel, is that these ecological subsidies have work behind them, and that what's really being captured there is the work of the geologists and the labour of the geologists. And I don't find that very satisfying, because whilst that doesn't seem to account for the tremendous value in energetic terms of oil resources or their concentration forms. So there is a labour history that precedes gifts of nature, but it doesn't seem sufficient to deal with the problem that you identify.
I just want to into this debate,
Yeah.
introducing the ERO indicators.
Yes.
Then in some way can synthesize also this surplus.
Giacomo, maybe we can speak.
Sorry.
I don't think we should try
Okay.
to project our voices.
I just want to introduce, linking this debate to, let's say, ecological matters and surplus, the ERO indicators. They in some way explain partially the subsidies coming from nature, let's say. Indeed, this is related also to the differentiation that you were trying to change in terms of cultivation, agriculture, and extraction. If you look at the transition in agriculture as well as in extraction of energy, you have this transition toward a low level of ERO. Both of them are characterized by a lower level of ERO, because they, with the label, we can act on technology and appropriation, but then we get out of the surplus in different, let's say, proportion, right? And this is, I think, is related to your narrative. Now, how you can also look at the extraction as a way to really change the extraction in a cultivated process, but again in a transition to a low level of energy output. The second is related to the fact that always relate to natural process and human health of human around this kind of production system. Because with my colleagues in Barcelona, we are thinking about also of accumulation by contamination. I put on the table because we are very slow in develop ideas, so probably someone can appropriate idea and develop further and faster than we can. And this is related to the fact that, for example, you just not appropriate the surplus, but you also, let's say, depleted the possibility of creation different kind of surplus from nature and from the body of people that are contaminated normally. So it's not just a matter of application, but it's when the cost shifting is really a successful process, you also undermine the possibility of new kind of use, as you were saying. No, it's not a matter of all the land here is appropriated by and for a certain kind of production, but impede different kind of production and livelihood to go further. So this are the 2 points: EROI and accumulation by contamination as a idea to also to describe different process of or consequences of extraction use.
That accumulation by contamination is that the particular instance of this externalization of environmental costs?
Yeah, it's let's say it's a successful cost shifting.
Yes. Right.
That undermine different kind of use of land, of resources, of body, and so on. No?
Right.
So undermine the different possibility of existence, let's say.
Yes. Yeah. So I suppose I'm just trying to think whether that's a distinctive case or whether it's one of degree, because it's a particular degree of cost shifting to the point that it eradicates alternative possibilities. So a lot of mining produces these wastes that sterilise land effectively. So alternative land use in the area for long periods of time in the future cannot be used in a viable way. So that sounds as a particular instance of a generalised problem, generalised issue of spatial cost shifting. The EROI, energy return on energy invested, that's fascinating because in energetic terms, tar sands and a lot of industrial agriculture, close to one-to-one. But yet it's patently clear that plenty of people are circulating capital through those enterprises, even though the energy returned is close to one-to-one. So there's something else going on there beyond the physical energetic equations.
Okay. Is there another question?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
I'm wondering if these extractive moments, as you said,
Yeah.
correspond throughout history with cycles of or stages of financialization.
Could you repeat it a bit louder?
Sorry. I'm wondering if these extractive moments, as Gavin said, correspond to certain phases of financialization.
Yes, they do. If one looks at sort of systemic cycles of accumulation, so in a Rigi view of world political economy over the last 300 years, let's say. So one of the things that a Rigi does in these systemic cycles is you have a period of financialization that follows a period sort of industrial production. And the interesting thing between those two is that they're both linked to extractive enterprises. One in terms of raw material flows, the metabolism of raw materials, and the other in terms of capital export. So it's not that the period of financialization is the only period in which one gets. It's not the only period in which one gets extractive investments. That's not the case. But I do think in these periods of financialization, capital export associated with hegemonic industrial power, that there are absolutely new rounds of investment in resources in the periphery. So, the case of the UK at the end of the 19th century, a big round of investments in South Africa, in Latin America, etc. One sees a similar round from US export of capital during the 20th century. Stephen Bunker's work on Japan made a similar argument about Japanese investments in the 1970s and 80s in the acquisition of raw materials, and it's not much of a stretch to say a similar thing going on with China today, where you've got, through the industrialization process within those national economies, the pooling up of surplus, which is my left-hand spiral on that diagram, which then overflows and produces new geographies of investment. Not all of it's in extraction, a lot of it's in infrastructure, railroad investments, transport, ports, things like that. But what's interesting is a sizable chunk of it is into extractive investments. So that's partly this episodic periodicity to this, which I think is linked to the availability of surplus to flow into these ventures.
Maybe one last question, if there is. And we can always, of course, talk to the cabinet. Is that okay? Yeah. Over lunch. Okay. If there is no further question at this moment, I'd like to thank you, Gavin, very much for very inspiring.
Pleasure. Thank you. So, can I just briefly apologise, because I'm going to have to go teach this afternoon. So I won't be around for much of the afternoon until 4 o'clock, and I also won't be around tomorrow morning because I'm teaching again tomorrow morning. But when all that's done, I shall be back. So I'll be delighted to
Gavin
be
and
around.
Eric and I will be alternating a bit because all three of us teach. That's the problem when you're in your own institution. You can't stop doing everyday things, but at least one or two of us will be all the time around. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Now, a bit of housekeeping before we disappear. You do need to take all your valuables from the room because, just don't need anything.